on a construction job, you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to do a job. And so my last video that I had, I noticed that the first person that watched it unsubscribed. Fucking pussy. So people say, yeah, but you're selling a product. And so therefore, you need to be kind to your consumers, right? To the consumer ears, right? You have to say things like they want to hear, right? And you got to talk the way they want you to talk and go fuck yourself. How's that sound? How about you go fuck yourself? Like I said before, if I wanted to please everybody or the majority of people, I would talk shit about America and white people exclusively. And that will get clicks, and that will get eyes and ears and everybody on your side. That's right. They don't want to know shit else because they're fucking cunts. Go fuck yourself. But here in this episode, I wanted to continue with the Bernal Diaz del Castillo when he went to Mexico. If you've seen the last video, if not, then this is all new then. But Bernal Diaz del Castillo came to Mexico and they had a little scuffle with some natives at the time, Mayans, and here now I'm going to address that. They took two of the Indians with them, and they said that that the Indians, the natives, the Mayans at the time, and of the area of now Mexico, those two natives were baptized like right away. And then they took on Christian names too. One was named Melchior, and the other one was Julian. Okay. And he doesn't mention what their names were prior to being baptized. He says, well, they fought that little battle from that last episode, and they addressed the wounds of the men, and they took a couple of the Indians with them, and they got it back on a boat, and they kept discovering new lands for themselves. What would you do if somebody came into your neighborhood and tore it all up, and then they took you and then tried to baptize you the next day? Would you be all in? You would be like, okay, this sounds cool. But I'm guessing those guys really didn't have a choice at the time, so they're just going along with it. There's another guy that happened to on the eastern end of the United States way back in the day, but that's a different episode. So Bernal Diaz del Castillo and his people that he was with had discovered Campeche for themselves. It's on the coast of Mexico over there, if you all know Mexico and the coast. So after about 14 days, they came across the coast and they found another village and another little bay area where they could pull their boat in, and they found a little like stream and where they could get some water. And this was on a Sunday, Lazari. They called it Lazari. I don't know what Lazari is. I think that's Easter or something like that, or the day before Easter or some shit like that. But wouldn't that be on a Saturday? I don't know. So they named the area after that day, but they already knew that the natives already called it Campeche, which it still is called that to this day. And if you look up the area, there's not a lot of people that visit that area. I don't know why, probably because the cartel runs it. Who knows? So they sent a few boats to the shore, well armed, because they weren't sure if they were going to run into the same kind of natives that they ran into at the Cape Cotoche from the last episode. So the water was really shallow, so they parked their ship like 3 miles away from the shoreline. They had a few boats going inland, and so when they got to shore, they filled up their casks and got some water, and they were ready to get back on their boat and leave. And then about 50 Indians came up to them. And they're like, "Hey, wait a second, guys, we want to talk to you." They said, "What you want?" They said, "Hey, are you guys from the sun?" And they pointed to the sun, and they're like, "No." And then they said, well, after some talking and hand gestures, the natives invited the Europeans to the Indian town. And like their last stop, they did a little huddle, and they're like, "Hey guys, what do you think we should do? Should we do it?" And they said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go. Let's check it out." And here in this village in Campeche, when the Europeans arrived, they seen a bunch of pyramids built with a bunch of idols and pictures and stuff like that. And they're like, "Wow, this is crazy." And they said, "Wow, this is pretty good architecture. Good job, guys." And then they seen blood. And they said, "Well, it looks like they just sacrificed somebody," because the blood was fresh, I guess. But back in those days, it was kind of normal. And so they're like, okay, so I guess they just killed somebody. And the Indians were like, yeah, we just did. Killed somebody. How do you like the water? Is water good? But here I'll quote Bernal Diaz del Castillo. He said, it appears to us that the inhabitants had just been sacrificing some Indians to their gods to obtain from them the power to overcome us. Unquote. So, yeah. And then a bunch of the Indians and their wives were there, and they were really happy and smiling, and everybody was hanging out and cool. And he says, okay, this is kind of weird. And then the numbers started getting bigger. Then more Indians started showing up, and then the Europeans started getting scared. They're like, what the fuck is going on here, man? And they thought, okay, we're probably going to go to war with these fucking guys just the same we did last time. What the hell? Why did we come here? But then there was a little group of Indians that approached him with some kind of tattered cloaks, carrying bundles of dried reeds and shit like that, that they arranged on the ground. And among those guys were a bunch of other guys with weapons. So they're like, fuck, what's going on? Then some other dudes came out. Let me quote Bernal Diaz del Castillo here. He says, among them we perceived two troops of men armed with bows, lances, shields, slings, and stones, having their cotton carcasses on. And at the head of these, and at some distance from us, stood the chiefs. And at this moment 10 Indians came running out of another temple, all dressed in long robes, while the thick of their hair on their heads was so entangled with clotted with blood that it would have been an impossibility to have combed it or put it in order without cutting it off. So there was some kind of ceremony going on there. So they just sacrificed some people, and then they brought the Europeans there. Now they got all these fucking dudes showing up, and everybody's smiling, hanging out, and who knows if they're smiling about another sacrifice. But then these magician dudes or religious people show up and come and greet the Europeans. And then there's a group of guys with blood in their hair. What the fuck is that? He said it was so entangled with blood and maybe dried blood that he couldn't comb through it. I don't know. Why would they do that, man? I mean, that's their culture. That's their thing, I guess. But of these people, there were priests and of the Indian priest, right? And they called them papas. And so he referred to them as papas throughout the rest of his memoirs. And these guys brought some kind of resin with them, some kind of incense that burned, that they called copal. And they had these pans filled with coals and then this incense, and they were burning it around the Europeans at the time. And they're like, fuck, man, what is this shit? They call this the blood of the trees. I think it's from the linden tree and some other types of trees that they gather the sap from, and then they burn that. So through gestures and signs, the Indians told the Europeans that they're going to burn the incense, and that the Europeans should follow the incense, the people, the procession, right, to the shore. And the Europeans didn't want to fight Indians again, so they're like, fuck this, man, let's follow these guys, take their advice, follow this incense fucking parade to the shore, and we'll get back on the boats and head out. He said because the last fight that they were in, they had two of the Europeans were killed. I think they were wounded, and they got to the ship. And so when they were making their way to Campeche, two of the Europeans died in the ship. And they're like, well, we can't keep them in the boat, so let's throw them overboard. So, yeah, so there's remains of some Europeans in that part of the ocean there. It was eaten by a fish that gave birth to other fish. And so that fish that you ate was part of that Spanish DNA. Now you fucking hate yourself. So this was the second village that they hit on the coast of Mexico when they were checking out the area. So yeah, a lot of people won't like this kind of history because they didn't hear about any blood or death, right? I mean, does it always have to be somebody getting killed or somebody winning or somebody losing? I guess there is a possibility that those natives had heard through others that the Europeans were in the area, so they knew who they were and they just didn't want to deal with them. So like, hey guys, here's a good chance for you to get the fuck out of here. And that's what happened. But don't worry, there's a lot more to come as far as Bernal Diaz del Castillo. I heard that he had been in like some 120 battles with Hernan Cortez. And so he wrote down all this different shit. So it's going to be interesting to check out each little episode. And just instead of mentioning all of them in one little episode, vaguely mentioning it, I'm going into the detail here so you can hear about the personalities and, the situations they had, because I think it's a little bit interesting. If you don't like it, go fuck yourself. Anyway, subscribe, like this video. If you don't, get the fuck out now. Share it with your friends and your enemies, and they'll hate you for it. Adios.